Hello and welcome to Vision Denial. My name is Sam, and if you're new here, I've watched every single playoff from all of the regions, all 383 games for summer, yes, including that one. And this is just the show where I recap the days of Worlds. Day 2 of Playins has just come and gone, and more like status quo than expected. Anywho, you'll be seeing a bunch of the different reviews that I did for each individual game. Usually these will come out on TikTok as well. If you want to see that, I've got a link for that down below. And that's about it. Oh yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm really interested in terms of like the kinds of games that we received. But before we actually delve into that, let's go and start with our first game of the day. Our first game of the day was Detonation Focus Me, or it was Fnatic versus Detonation Focus Me. And Detonation Focus Me managed to play an early game that could keep up with Fnatic, as Fnatic became a little bit more reckless with their approach. I really liked the vision play from both sides and how neutrals were prioritized, making it clear that the factor was who made the first move and if it was better than the defense that their opponent had in. In the case of Fnatic versus Detonation Focus Me, the answer is pretty clear. Each lane fell behind fairly hard, only staying relevant on situations where Detonation Focus Me could answer with kills of some sort. But the second Fnatic found an even slight gold lead, they found the angle that they needed and ran with it. DFM have a long way to go in the situations given how much they would overstep to force the tempo. The remaining games are going to be just as hard, and they are aspiring great confidence regarding that. While Fnatic have only shown solid performance so far, and we shouldn't expect any different for this particular group. My MVP goes to Humanoid, who keeps such a commanding force of his lane, making everyone's job that much easier. Our second game of the day was Evil Geniuses versus Loud. Honestly, Evil Geniuses having full priority and proactivity leads me to believe that the whole game was in their control. Don't get me wrong, Loud answered Evil Genius's early aggressions near perfectly, and the skill checks seemed fairly even, but the overall approach to vision and skirmishes throughout the game meant that it was on Evil Geniuses to fumble so that Loud could win. I do think that Loud had some impressive proactive moves, especially regarding neutrals, but waiting on those timers as lanes around you fall behind slowly and surely, not a good look. It also doesn't help that Croc didn't take full advantage of his tempo control that he had on Inspired the first few minutes of the game. Evil Geniuses disappoint me given how much was clearly prepared and yet misexecuted anyways. Whether it is nerves or pressure of expectation, this kind of fumbling is still concerning regardless of the reason. My MVP is Inspired just from the amount of utility he offered super quietly with all of these team fights. Our third game of the day was Saigon Buffaloes versus Isurus Gaming. Honestly, the draft shakeup and early game approach from Isurus was pretty fantastic, keeping up with the tempo that Saigon Buffalo wanted to play through. My issue comes from where the priority was set for the game. Over-indexing on 8AD Zillion top, while Shogun amassed so much gold with no answer on how Gavoto was going to keep up, made the mid-game harder for themselves. The Buffaloes applying the right steps and pressure to ensure the tempo of the game kept increasing and gold kept ballooning like, really just overemphasized the mistake that Isurus put in. The answers to every engage Isurus threw at them was coordinated incredibly well, and the stronger vision application overall. It's not a surprise on how Saigon Buffalo's won. It's a surprise where Isurus chose to prioritize their time and effort. By the time late game is up, Shogun is too strong and the tools around him to succeed at their power spikes that any attempt at shutting him down just led to him getting a pentakill near instantly. Shogun played almost all aspects of that game flawlessly, leading to him getting my MVP. Big surprise. Fourth game of the day was Detonation Focus Me versus the Chiefs. There's a point where we recognize that much of the Chiefs' success in the LCO is through laning phase prowess, and when they keep facing teams that have some of the strongest laners from their own regions, and they can't translate what was once easy success into a good game plan, doesn't look great. That said, the Chiefs did understand how to approach vision denial and recognize their strengths in a fight. They just failed to recognize the strengths brought by Detonation Focus Me. Speaking of strengths from DFM, the poor late game decision making came full throttle this game, where many bizarre positional errors, overextensions, or engaged options allowed the Chiefs to come back in briefly, but otherwise the early to mid game from Detonation Focus Me was really solid, allowing multiple avenues in which they could collect gold globally, trading up on the few lost skirmishes that they had, and overall played to their win conditions near perfectly. I am worried by how trigger happy they are once the ball is rolling, but I like that they don't slow down the pace of the game. My MVP would usually go to Yuapon for his position, but Yaharong provided a lot more map pressure globally when shutting down Tali, and created a lot of game-winning plays that zoned the Chiefs out. Our fifth game of the day is Evil Geniuses versus MegaBank Beyond Gaming. The first 10 minutes of the game from Evil Geniuses is incredibly solid. Fantastic map movement, solid vision play, great understanding of the matchup, and where to apply their win conditions. But then we get such a slow mid to late game that I wonder how Evil Geniuses are going to face other teams who would have a strong understanding of pacing and proactive play while behind. Because while they answered some of Beyond Gaming's attempts to come back into the game excellently, it's only when Beyond Gaming would attempt anything that the pace of the game moved forward. Beyond Gaming, for their part, also played super slow once they fell behind, opting a little too late to play aggressively, especially with the draft that required so much early work to get going. They were also second to the play in every given moment until they had lost full control, and it was not a great look from them, especially if your very proactive team comp winds up falling super behind. Also, the neutral priority of this game was not great from either side. My MVP goes to Jojo who managed to find so many solid points of attack that Beyond Gaming really couldn't answer. Our sixth game of the day is DRX versus Saigon Buffaloes. While the game itself seemed slow, DRX did such an incredible job suffocating their resources non-stop that the gold would balloon naturally. The Buffaloes attempted a draft that on paper would work, but would require so many resources to actually work out that it seemed to just crumble apart just as the game started. There was a good attempt at an early game, but not enough for it to matter. I still think that DRX should have increased the tempo of the game. This pace is very safe and worries me a little bit when, note not if, they make it into groups and they don't increase the tempo where other teams won't just let them balloon the game without actually properly contesting them. I do want to say that DRX have been the strongest neutral team so far and the cleanest team at closing out games. My MVP is Juhan, who recognized where to shut down Saigon Buffalo's win conditions and created a vision nightmare for them. Our 7th game of the day is Mad Lions versus Royal Never Give Up. Royal Never Give Up in the first 20 minutes look almost flawless. Clean vision play, solid neutral setups, and while some engages look out of place, the coordination is there. That said, after the 20-minute mark, the Royals start to make bizarre macro choices that allow Mad to slowly creep back into the game. Both teams had a level of coordination and proactivity that I rather enjoyed, but Mad was always on the back foot attempting to predict where to go, as opposed to just being the one setting the pace. Mad looks solid individually, but their early game doesn't seem to be improving at any rate, and this will look worse for them against DRX, who have such a solid early game to late game setup. I think stylistically, this was an interesting game to analyze in terms of flaws of both teams. It's clear to me that Mad have a long way to go before being a convincing team for the group stage, and the Royals need to seriously curb their tendencies towards Barons, because the pace they had before the repeated failed Baron plays was really excellent, and lost so easily from there. Like, come on. My MVP for this game is Wei, who had such a phenomenal performance on Grave that Mad couldn't keep up with and enabled every lane. And our last game of the day was DenizBank Istanbul Wildcats versus DRX. Let's not kid ourselves here. To think that we would expect the Wildcats to win is not there. We did expect them to properly execute some team fights, always look for some angles of attack, and large focus on the late game team fighting. What we got instead was an excellent early game approach to their win condition, and DRX saying, "We are now going to style on you really hard." And not just in fights, in vision, neutral setups, side lane pressures, tempo control, gold leads being ballooned more and more. The Wildcats did not know how to consistently answer the onslaught that DRX kept bringing, but that did not stop them from trying, and also punishing DRX's sloppier skirmishes. That said, the Wildcats couldn't find any opportunities around punishes to regain ground, as DRX would usually be elsewhere on the map, gaining even more control. Outside of the spectacle, DRX did spend a lot of time in their setups to guarantee that their win conditions would be going, while sowing the confusion with every fight, meaning that while they lost a skirmish, they would gain way more, and if they won the skirmish, then they would just suffocate the Wildcats, who at this point look like they are on their way to be eliminated from Worlds so quickly. My MVP is Zeka, if only because he just didn't die compared to everybody else, and was causing so many issues for the Wildcats around the map. What an incredibly interesting day. Day 2 really brings in a solid, fundamental understanding of how the play-ins itself will go. Things as similar as like Aatrox being consistency within everything, 100% pick ban rate, and like how so much of the meta shifted from a bot lane focus before Worlds to now a mid jungle focus, making things rather interesting for for the teams who found success through the bot lane, and even more interesting for the teams that barely succeeded coming in, but their style greatly benefits from this new mid-jungle approach. Personally, 2 days is still a little early to really be like, yes, solid fundamentals of what's going to happen. We've only had 16 games. There's a lot of volatility that exists with that, but there is some consistency depending on the situation. DRX seems to have shown us that they are better just out of all of the 12 teams that are currently playing in play-ins. They look the strongest. Fnatic right after, of course, but like those two teams look like they're untouchable and are almost guaranteed to go all the way up. But here comes the situation where we have to speculate a little bit. If they lean too much into the overconfidence, then I can totally see either of these teams losing something. We get an interesting tiebreaker setup. But as I can see that, I don't actually expect it. DRX has had a huge improvement over time. Fnatic has kept up the consistency of playoffs, which is fantastic. And it's just a matter of do the Royals like ever step up? Does Beyond Gaming like pull off the same kind of form that they had in their playoffs? Does like Mad Lions even do anything at this particular moment? Because the early game for Mad Lions is really dodgy at best. And looking at this particular, and I'm looking right now just at all the different champs that have been played so far, and I think it's super interesting that we're winding up with, I don't want to say necessarily like a hodgepodge situation, because many of the bot laners don't have the same kind of pick options. So it's a lot of comfort, it's a lot of team fights, a lot of dive. Understandable, right? And the top laners seem to have even fewer selection. Aatrox is so good, and people have to like opt in to figure out the counters for Aatrox that the pool just squeezes a little bit. So then my thought process here is, what is better? Because there's clearly going to be things that are better. It does not have a 100% win rate. It only has a 63% win rate, but like that's aside the point. This is not a pick that I can see really being that explosive that it would acquire priority over any other team fighting options or engage angles. At least those are mostly my thoughts from the day. Day 2 was so fairly standard that like I'm looking at day 3, and the most interesting matchups that we got over here are Chiefs versus Evil Geniuses, Beyond Gaming versus Detonation, Focus Me, Mad Lions versus Saigon Buffaloes. That happens in the early parts of the day. Those are going to be really the shakeups, the things that really determine how the entire, those like individual groups are going to go. So those are just mostly my thoughts. I want to hear what you guys have to think. Do you think that there's something really bizarre about the way the top lane meta has gone, and that like the consequences of bot lane are going anywhere? Do you think that tomorrow's games are going to be a lot more like just a formality of the situation, or is there a possibility even that maybe, just maybe, one of these teams will knock a peg or two off of Fnatic and DRX? I'd love to hear any of your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you again for watching. I super appreciate it. If you like any extra stuff, I'm going to have a playlist of all of the other teams, as well as a playlist of previous videos regarding Worlds or any future ones after this one has been uploaded. And if you like this kind of content, leave a like and subscribe. You've all been fantastic with watching these videos. I appreciate any conversation that does happen. And with that, I'll see you next time.